Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with Nick Whalen. And on the podcast today, we will say goodbye to all of you as we wrap up the regular season in the 24-25 calendar year for the NBA. A look ahead to next year and some potential first-round picks in fantasy, as well as NBA playoff matchups. The Western Conference is drunk right about now. There are about 50 different combinations, but we will do our best to preview some of that as well. Nick, a bittersweet episode here today.
Yeah, regular season's coming to an end. We are first and foremost a fantasy basketball show. The fantasy basketball season, of course, comes to an end on Sunday, if not earlier in the season. So we'll be cutting back a little bit. We'll still jump on a few times during the playoffs. We'll have plenty of off-season content for you, but our regular, 4-episode per week schedule will be coming to an end. So that means you and I will not be doing these shows quite as regularly, Brandon, but you'll still be heavily involved. We'll get you going on the VSiN show as well. So like you mentioned, wanted to talk about the playoff races, want to look at, who the early first round might be in fantasy drafts next year. When I put that together, it was earlier this morning, and in the time since, we have now found out that a second Western Conference contending team has fired its coach. I thought the Taylor Jenkins firing was surprising. This is significantly more surprising because I think the Nuggets are in a better spot than the Grizzlies are. Even though they've lost 4 in a row, I think they're 6-10 in their last 16. It's like, yeah, they're not exactly rolling into the postseason right now. They're not looking dominant, but I think if you lined up those two teams, Memphis and Denver, and said, which team could you see making a run? It's going to be Denver. Obviously, everybody's going to say that. So to make this decision at this juncture in the season, I said it about Taylor Jenkins. It's unprecedented. It's just wild. You don't even see bad teams doing this. It's not like in the NFL where you'll fire a coach late in the year and you want to give a coordinator a chance to, show himself and maybe earn that job. I guess you could make the argument that's maybe what the Nuggets are doing here, but I think this runs a lot deeper, Brandon. I mean, not only do you let go of Mike Malone, but you let go of Calvin Booth as well, your general manager. I mean, I think there had to be significant things going on behind the scenes. And I'm certainly not going to pin this on Nikola Jokic, but you have to think this was run by Nikola Jokic, right? Is there any world in which you make this decision? You fire the GM, you fire the head coach without consulting the best player in the world? The reason that you're locked into 50 wins every single year? No, of course not.
If there's ever a star that doesn't want to be involved in that conversation, though, I think it would be Nikola Jokic. So possibly that is the case. I just can't imagine anybody within the organization that has the stroke to make this decision, and Jokic is definitely part of that contingent, that anybody would sit and say, our best chance to win a championship this year is to fire our head coach. Memphis making that decision for Taylor Jenkins was them saying, we don't think that you are good enough or that this team is good enough, so we're just not going to delay the inevitable. That makes a little more sense for Memphis because, truthfully, they're not good enough to win the championship. Denver kind of is. They might not be at the top of your list, but they're on a short list of teams that you think could legitimately win the title because of how great Jokic is and the run that he's already been on in doing exactly that with Mike Malone as the head coach. It really doesn't make sense to me, the timing of it.
It doesn't. And I think that just adds to this notion that, again, things had to be bad behind the scenes. You don't make it. There's a reason it's unprecedented, right? You don't do this unless you feel like you absolutely have to. And hopefully we'll find out more about this than we have about the Taylor Jenkins situation. We still haven't really gotten the true juicy details there, but everything you said is correct. I think, Denver is in a better position than Memphis. Yeah, you don't love the recent form, but you put Nikola Jokic against anybody in a playoff series, you're going to have a chance. Now, making this move, it's a signal to me that if we are assuming that the Nuggets ownership or management or whoever's making these decisions is operating based on logic, then they think that making this decision, firing your head coach with 6 days left in the regular season, gives them a better chance to win the NBA title this year. I don't know if I could agree with that. There's virtually no precedent for it. I think you could look back at the 2016 Cavs, who fired David Blatt and then won the title that year with Tyronn Lue. They fired David Blatt after 41 games. It was literally the exact halfway point of the season. So you had a long runway to get Ty Lue in there, to get the players kind of used to his style, to transition away from David Blatt. I mean, this is we're less than 2 weeks away from game 1 of the first round. I think this is just wild. And, the Calvin Booth part of it, that to me is a little bit easier to understand. I think Calvin Booth has gone out of his way to, kind of tout these draft picks and we're drafting and developing. At the same time, you let go of KCP, you let go of Bruce Brown. You didn't really add any key veterans when you have this championship window with Jokic, but it's tough to say how much you can really pin on Calvin Booth versus, an ownership group that has pretty openly not been willing to spend, deep into the tax to maximize this thing. So it's puzzling. It's puzzling. I thought the Memphis thing was crazy at the time. This is like 2 levels up.
I mean, the fact that they're not playing well, I can't imagine that a 4-game losing streak is enough to go, all right, got to get rid of the coach and the general manager.
Paul Murray has missed all those games. Jokic has missed like 6 of the last 15. There are reasons you could point to. I don't know. I mean, it's also worth noting that Mike Malone has had fallouts before. I don't think he's the easiest guy to work with.
No, definitely not.
I think this is, and John Krasinski for The Athletic, who mostly covers the Timberwolves, he tweeted earlier today that it's been, an open secret essentially that, management and the coaching staff have not seen eye to eye. Again, decisions like this don't just come out of nowhere. You don't wake up one day and say, how do we lose to the Pacers on Sunday? We got to fire this guy. Like, this is something that clearly has been brewing under the surface for a while. Something I will point out, Brandon, that's a little interesting. Earlier this morning at like 7 a.m. when I checked, Denver Nuggets 8-1 to win the West. Fire Mike Malone. Denver Nuggets 8-1 to win the West.
That doesn't necessarily surprise me. Coaches really don't move betting markets. I think they are less appealing to bet on, but if you're on the Nuggets bandwagon financially, I think you just kind of stay the course. Or if that was a bet that you wanted to make before, you're not doing it because you believe in Mike Malone. So it's strange because there is that gap. Like, the betting markets can tell you a lot about projections and what you can expect to see moving forward. But I don't think NBA fans or NBA bettors in general look at coaching as this big differentiator of who you believe in and who you don't. It is such a star-driven league. I like to think that coaching matters, but that is interesting that doesn't move the needle at all. I can't say that I'm shocked, but it's an interesting nugget.
Well,
pun intended.
Fun. Well, let me ask you this. So do you view, like, if you're the Lakers, the Clippers, the Timberwolves, the Warriors, these ultra stable organizations in the Western Conference who have not fired their head coach in the season, you could throw the Rockets in there too. It's like, is this good news? Are you like, oh, all right, the Nuggets are vulnerable, they're panicking before the playoffs? Or is it, oh boy, maybe this spurs something, maybe this was something that was, brewing beneath the surface, and the fact that they got Booth out of there, they got Malone out of there, and maybe it does galvanize this team in some way.
It depends on how much these guys hated Mike Malone, because right. We've seen that bounce back from teams happens all the time in football, both at the college and NFL level. The coach that the whole team has stopped listening to for the last month gets fired, and what do? No matter how bad the team is, they go out and they win the very next game.
Dennis
I mean, do they hate him that much? I don't know. If that's the case, I thought that maybe that would be the case with the Memphis Grizzlies with firing Taylor Jenkins, but they went on a losing streak after they fired him. I would think that those teams you're talking about are looking at this and they are salivating at the idea of meeting the Denver Nuggets now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to fight you either way. You could have answered that in either direction, and I think there's a reasonable case. The way that this does differ from the Memphis situation to me is that, like, with the Grizzlies, are you consulting John Morant? Are you consulting Jaren Jackson on these decisions? Are those guys at that stature where they have a say, or were they as surprised as anybody when Jenkins was let go? Like, Jokic to me is in a completely different tier, right? Like, you absolutely, like, number one thing, it's similar to what's been going on in Milwaukee these last couple of years. They've made coaching changes and everything runs through Giannis, right? The number, like, almost above winning a championship is make sure Giannis is happy. Make sure Giannis doesn't want to leave. And Jokic, has never really put anything out there. He's about as low key as it gets. I think that's been a blessing for Denver, but that's your number one priority as an organization. Like, again, it's almost impossible for me to imagine that this decision was made without at least running it by Nikola Jokic. Whereas in Memphis, John Morant, for a lot of obvious reasons, I think is a more difficult player to trust with the future of your organization. Whereas in Denver, if you don't have Jokic, you don't have anything.
But I still think John Morant had something to do with the Taylor Jenkins firing. And he clearly feels more free as a player And I think that's obvious in some of his actions without Taylor Jenkins as the head coach. And he was trying this whole new European system that took the ball out of Ja Morant's hands more than what he's used to. Ja had to play a different style. Stars don't like that, especially when their numbers start to dip. And then once you start to lose, forget it. Then you lose everybody. So I think Ja Morant did have something to do with it. Does he have as much power as Jokic? I would certainly hope not, because Jokic should be the kind of guy that can call the shot on who his coach is. It's just fascinating that it would happen at this point in the season. Nikola Jokic is a very smart individual. Yes, he goes about his business as if he doesn't care. I don't really buy that. I think Jokic does care. You can't be that great without being a devil of the details. And to have this in your head that our best chance to move forward into the playoffs is to fire the coach, you got to have a lot of faith in who's standing there, handing out the plays as far as that interim goes. And I don't know exactly who they're turning to or how much faith
one of
the team has in those guys.
I don't have his name on hand, but no, the nice thing is we're going to find out our answer right away. We are going to, it's less than 2 weeks from now. We're going to know, did this help? Did it hurt? Maybe it's going to be a net neutral result. Who knows? Maybe the Nuggets were always, going to be a second round exit or something like that. But what makes it even tougher to discern is we have no idea where they're going to land in the Western Conference standings. I would love to, normally this time of year, I'd love to make this a show where we could start looking at matchups and, all right, who do you like in this series? Just no idea. No idea. We have 4 teams right now, Brandon, who are exactly 46 and 32. The Clippers, the Warriors, the Wolves, and the Grizzlies. Any of those teams could end up in the play-in. Denver is only a half game up on those teams. They have 3 games this week. They could wind up in the play-in. The Lakers mathematically could still do it. By the way, the Lakers look like they're going to hold everybody out tonight against OKC. They play a back-to-back. They are currently 15.5-point underdogs at OKC. I'm not saying the Thunder wouldn't be favored either way. That's a pretty large number. And it looks to me like the Lakers are going to punt this game and go all out against Dallas on Wednesday. They then play Houston on Friday. At that point, Houston could have the 2 seed locked up. So I think if you're the Lakers, you're crossing your fingers that maybe that's a rest game for the Rockets. And then they play Portland on Sunday. That's a team that's eliminated. Who knows who's going to be out there. Lakers just have to go 2-2 because of all the tiebreakers that they hold to clinch the 3 seed. So something to keep an eye out, if you haven't taken a look at the markets yet for tonight.
Betting on the NBA this time of year is not for the faint of heart. I bet this league every single night. It is disgusting right now. What goes on at this stage in the season. I just wish they would slam the door shut on the last couple of weeks. And then the problem is that then the 2 weeks that come before this would then become the last 2 weeks. So it's really unavoidable. But the last couple of weeks of the NBA season, as somebody who is obsessed with this league, is about 60 to 70% unwatchable at this point, and certainly unbettable, which doesn't help the watching aspect of it.
Yeah. We cashed a nice little 4-leg prop parlay last night.
I had a feeling when I saw you go, well, I'm not so sure about that. That looked like a winning ticket face.
That slate last night, it's like that is right in my wheelhouse. Just kind of 2 random games. You got one slot fest with the Sixers involved. We had Pella Larson props going. We had Davion Mitchell props going. It's hard, but there are areas to exploit.
There's always something. That is definitely the case. But are you going to enjoy the process this time of year? It's hard to. The Rockets seemingly have already locked up that spot. It would take a pretty massive collapse for them not to be the 2 seed, which means they're going to get a shoulder shrug, who knows, in the first round. But right now, any combination of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Memphis Grizzlies, Sacramento Kings, Dallas Mavericks, you could even get the Warriors or the Clippers, and who knows. But right now, I can tell you that as far as the confidence that I have in the Western Conference going into the playoffs, I love the way the LA Clippers have been playing heading into the postseason. This team is really buttoned up right now. Kawhi Leonard has really turned the clock back. This is a team that I have already placed a 30-1 wager on to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals. To me, it's all about path for them. They have to be matched up with the right teams in order to gain that steam and actually just simply advance out of round 1. You get that's the first step. Getting out of the play-in helps because then you avoid the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't think out of the gate that's not a winning bet or one that's even hedgeable because you're probably not going to win that series. I do like the way that it stands right now. And this kind of goes back to our Mike Malone conversation. Going up against Denver in round one was not ideal for me. Now it feels a lot better. You give me Ty Lue against interim coach that's not going to be as buttoned up as Mike Malone. I like my chances there. So in that sense, for me personally, the betting markets might not reflect this, but for me personally, betting on round one, if it were to stand the way that it is right now, I like the Clippers more. I like the bet that I have even more with Denver being that round one matchup. So I'm hoping that this sticks.
Well, Clippers are 18-1 right now at DraftKings to win the West. So either way, you got some nice value sitting on that ticket. I mean, I think it's a fool's errand to already talk about the matchups, and it's like, even like, it's not going to be a total cakewalk for OKC in round one, not in my opinion, and unless Sacramento or Dallas or maybe Memphis, end up, as the 8 seed, like, it could be the Clippers, it could be the Warriors, it could be the Timberwolves. It's like those are series that Oklahoma City will be favored in for good reason, but it's not a total cakewalk. Like in the East, would be shocking, beyond shocking, if the Cavs or the Celtics lost in round one. It'd even be pretty shocking to me if the Knicks lost in round one. Like, there are just no guarantees in the Western Conference. And we talk about Houston being in pole position to clinch the 2, the Lakers in pole position to clinch the 3. Like, that's all well and good, but it's like, by the time we get to Sunday night, it might even be, you might feel better about being the 4 or the 5 than you would the 3, especially, right? I think the big advantage for the 1 and the 2 seeds is you're catching those play-in teams off of the play-in tournament. They're basically turning around. You got 48 hours then to go, play that game, especially for the second play game. It's especially an advantage for the 1 seeds for OKC. But the way things break down, I think each team has its preferences. That the Lakers might want to play a different team in round one than the Nuggets might, than the Clippers might. But when you're looking at the Clippers specifically, I'm with you. This team looks really dangerous. I do worry a little bit about their depth or lack thereof, but in the playoffs, maybe that's less of a concern. Obviously, we know the caveats here. James Harden, very bad playoff resume. Kawhi Leonard hasn't made it through a healthy playoffs in forever. So we're asking some things to happen here, but I think the Clippers at full strength look as scary to me as anybody outside of OKC in the Western Conference. When you talk about those matchups, and I guess we could start with round one, so is Denver that team? Like, you'd rather play Denver right now than Minnesota or Golden State or the Lakers? Like, what is your preferred path, I guess, as you try to map out that future at 30-1 on the Clippers?
Yeah, I really don't want, if I'm just projecting, I want the Clippers to go as far as possible to create opportunities for myself. And it really was just it's about the number. This isn't me picking the Clippers to represent the West. I'm like everybody else. I think OKC is going to get there. I just want to see how far this ticket can take me so that I can find opportunities, because I thought it was a good number. Obviously, that has already proven to be the case, but they've got to advance. I want no part of Golden State early. Since they've added Jimmy Butler, this team has been lights out when they've really put the pedal to the metal. Steph Curry seems to be running out of gas a little bit. They need to continue to, I think Steve Kerr has to go back to what he was doing that week where he just said, just take off. They need him full strength. I want no part of that. In any series where Anthony Edwards is involved, he's got a case of being the best player in the series, and that usually takes you pretty far in the NBA playoffs. So I'd like to avoid that. Now, obviously, Nikola Jokic is also going to be able to claim that, but without a head coach and a team that, I understand why the GM got fired. I don't like the way that they've built this roster. I've honestly surprised that they've been as good as they have been. I thought they were going to take a serious step back. It just goes to show how good Jokic is. I like drawing a team like that in round one. The LA Lakers would not bother me. I am in heavy fade the Lakers mode. Yes, they have LeBron. Yes, they have Luka. That team I don't think they're going to be able to lock down defensively for a 7-game series. I do think the Clippers would win that. So I'd love to avoid Golden State. I'd like to avoid Minnesota. Give me the Lakers. Give me the Nuggets. And I think the LA Clippers would advance in those series.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair, man. You could talk me into just about any of these teams. I'm still kind of in the middle, I guess, on the Lakers. Like, I'm not pounding the table to, buy them at plus 650 to win the West. The case is very obvious, right? It's like you've combined 2 of the, I don't know, in my mind, top 7 or 8 players in the league right now. And, honestly, the big differentiator for them has been Austin Reaves. Like, there's a pretty strong argument that the Lakers have the best third option of all these teams that we're talking about. Now, they still have a glaring hole at center. You're asking a lot of Jackson Hayes. You're asking a lot of Rui and LeBron and Dorian Finney-Smith to cover up mistakes and constantly, be battling on that end just to survive against some of the elite bigs in the Western Conference. Golden State to me is really interesting. You catch them on the right night, and it's a lot like the Clippers, where you're just like, man, who's beating this team? You catch them on the wrong night, and certainly against Houston on Sunday was one of those. And you're thinking, okay, if we could just limit Stephen Curry, like we're not going to do what Amen Thompson did to him. We're not going to hold him to 3 points on 1 of 10 shooting, but it's like, okay, in that scenario where Steph Curry is held to maybe, let's say, 18 points on, I don't know, 6 of 21 from the field. Those games happen for everybody. They happen for Steph. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is a lot on Jimmy Butler. Like, Butler's got to give you 25, and he doesn't seem all that interested in necessarily doing that on a nightly basis. You have a complete non-scorer in Draymond Green. The bench is all over the place. Some nights Jonathan Kuminga looks great. Other nights they look like they're ready to pull him from the rotation. Moses Moody, I don't really trust. I consider him close to a non-scorer. And then you're into like, all right, can Brandon Podziemski just go off like he did against the Lakers on Thursday? Can Buddy Hield hit 6 threes? Like they're a deep team. They're a team that's used a lot of different bench options. But some of them are non-scorers. Some of them are scorers. Some of them are very hot and cold. Like Golden State to me, it's like they, at their best, sure, they could make the West Finals. I think that seems maybe a little bit more vulnerable than the recent record would imply.
They're just so much better since they added Jimmy, and so much better than I thought they would be adding him. I did not think this would be a needle mover. Part of it was that Jimmy had looked washed. Apparently that was self-induced because he has turned back. I can't even say turn back the clock. He's just trying again. I mean, it's really that simple. And he has meshed with this team so much better than I thought he would. This is not a 1-for-1 replacement of the artist formerly known as Klay Thompson, who stands out there as a elite perimeter defender and can knock down a 3 at any given point in the game. He's one of the best 3-point shooters in the history of basketball. Jimmy is not that, but he's such a clutch scorer. And if we get locked in playoff Jimmy to help alleviate Steph Curry, who I am the furthest thing from worried about come this time of year, it's a dangerous team. It doesn't really make sense for all the reasons that you said. They have so many holes in their roster, but where they don't have holes, Draymond Green is a non-scorer. He is still an elite defender.
Right.
They are dangerous. You keep them close in a late game situation in the playoffs, it's going to be hard to look away from the Warriors in any of those situations. And right now they would be playing the Lakers. I mean, talk about a ratings dream, by the way. Lakers Warriors in round 1. That might do better numbers than the finals.
Very possible. It's a very possible matchup. Speaking of the Lakers here, Aaron says, do you see Reaves being traded if LeBron wants to stay 2+ years? So yeah, there's a report last week that, LeBron would opt out and sign another deal. I don't know what we're looking at for a LeBron timeline at this point. Like, I mean, he's still a top 10 guy, especially over the second half of the season. He's just been incredible. And, it's kind of wild to think about some of the guys that have hung on. You think of like the end of Dirk's career, the end of Dwayne Wade's career. I don't know, Derrick Rose, Vince Carter. It's like these guys played like 5 years as just like pretty bad role players. It's like if LeBron really wants to do that, like, could he truly play until he's 47? It kind of feels that way. For what, I don't think they would trade Reaves. You got Reaves on like maybe the best contract in the NBA, 4 for $54, which is ridiculous. He's still under contract for like, under $14 million next season. Then he has a player option in 26, 27. So the clock is running on that. And, obviously if you're Austin Reaves, you are not picking up that player option. You're looking for a new deal. So this is a legitimate question. Like, I don't think the Lakers would necessarily go out of their way to do this, but if you can upgrade and Austin Reaves becomes the piece that you send to get somebody else, to get like a true big time third star, I don't know. Would they entertain a Kevin Durant trade? Like, that seems like something LeBron would be very interested in, given his personnel moves over the years. Then in that scenario, I could see them putting him on the table. We also got a comment here from a guy whose username I can't pronounce. Says, most of the time the title and the talking points are completely unrelated.
What does that mean?
I don't know. The title is best playoff matchups. I think that's what we're talking about here, but I don't know. Maybe the
I thought he was talking about the NBA title. I was trying to figure out but you're probably
I don't think
right.
so. I don't think so. Apologies if there's a mismatch, I suppose, on the episode description, but all right, that's enough playoff talk, Brandon, because I think everything is still so unsettled. I want to look at the first round for next year. We're trying to find ways to, look back on this season, which we've done on quite a few shows of late, start to look ahead at next year. Victor Wembanyama is where I want to start this. And I'm not suggesting that he won't be a first round pick. I think the upside obviously is there, but when you're dealing with a blood clot issue and, just the fact that he is the archetype of player that he is, there are going to be some concerns there. Is Victor Wembanyama in the number one overall pick conversation for you next season, given perhaps those concerns and given how well Nikola Jokic and SGA have played this year?
I think it becomes more of a question mark. It would have not been a non-question mark. If we had just seen Victor Wembanyama play out the season and the Spurs end however they end, doesn't matter. Just statistically, the way that Wemby was tracking and where he is age-wise, it would not even be a question that Victor Wembanyama, with his defense, outside shooting, and everything that he does, he'd be the number one pick. I think it just clouds that. But to me, the answer is still yes, that he'd be the number one overall pick because of all of those things. If you look at the timeline of when he should be able to get back to activity based on how long it takes for these blood thinners to take, you kind of have, I think for in terms of the length of the overall treatment that he is going through, you're probably talking about somebody that's going to start working out in about 4 to 6 months. Well, that puts us in a timeline where he is able to ramp up to the start of the season. Even if you miss the first 2 weeks, I don't think that you're basing number one overall pick status off of that if you think the guy is that good. So I think he's still the number one pick for me, even if he misses the first week or so of the season. It just becomes more of a question mark because of how good those guys and how reliable those players are right behind him.
Yeah, I think for me, it wouldn't necessarily be a concern of like missing time to begin the year, but just, the general risk of, something like that recurring. There's just not that many examples of, it's not like a hamstring. You're like, all right, we can look back at 1,000 other players who've strained their hamstring and here's how long he's going to miss. Here's what kind of risk he's at. Like, it's just, there's risk here. And,
the Spurs came out and said that there's not any long-term health concerns.
I don't know. I mean,
as it pertains to this,
that's what they're going to say, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying that would like, worry about his career being over, but he's also 7'5", and there are just other injury concerns there. I would take him as early as 3. I just think Jokic and SGA, barring something unforeseen between now and draft season, it's like there's just too much stability there. I know the shot blocking and in category leagues especially is just wild with Wembanyama, but if you look at our tool on RotoWire, where we give you basically a composite score for every player, like even on a per game basis, like Jokic is easily the number one player this season over Wembanyama, who's number 2.
And Jokic is going to have a new coach, so there's that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to argue. I think what you are drafting with Wemby is the same thing that you were drafting if you took him at number 1 or number 2 overall this past year. It's that he takes a leap that we don't know what it looks like yet, and you want to be on the front side of that rather than the back side of it. But Wemby's not going to be a bad pick, but if you just want to draft somebody, you have the number 1 overall pick, and you just want assurances, then SGA 2, Jokic 1 is that'd be the safe upside route. But there are going to be a lot of people that want to be in on a Victor Wembanyama and a third-year explosion to see what that looks like. Let's also keep in mind, this will be the first time that he's played on a real basketball team. The Spurs should be halfway decent at the start of next season. It's just been kind of load up on Wemby, and he still put up his numbers, but Victor Wembanyama should hit another level of dangerous when he gets back out onto the floor next year.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously barely got to play, if at all, with De'Aaron Fox, and beyond that, Spurs are in a good spot to add more to this roster. They'll have another lottery pick coming, so no, I think all that makes sense. My general point is just Jokic and SGA are so good. Like it's not like Wembanyama on a per game basis is like way better than those guys, and you factor in the risk. I think he's pretty clearly the number 3 guy for me, but I think we'll still see him go number 1. We'll see him go number 2 in some drafts. The next 2 guys in terms of per game value in category leagues this year are Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis. And this is almost a matter of like risk tolerance. Like all the numbers imply that if they play even 65 to 68 games, you're getting your ROI. But obviously both have had, significant missed games over the last few years. Davis, this has been an issue his entire career. Would you burn a mid first round pick on Luka or AD?
I would burn it on Luka. I would not on Anthony Davis. I can't get there. Outside of the top 12 for me, slam dunk to take Anthony Davis there with everything that he can do. And I'm very curious to see what it looks like long-term with Dallas. I do think it can work, but I have way more concerns over Anthony Davis. It just seems like it's always something different. This has been the case his entire career. Luka has his conditioning issues that lead to other problems, but when that guy is out there, he's a top 3 player in the NBA, and he's just missed less time. I have less question marks about Luka and his availability and really his durability than I do with Anthony Davis. I can't get there with AD. I can't be sitting there a month into the season. He's out for 2 weeks and I just have this gaping hole in my roster. It's almost something that you can bake into drafting him, and that has to knock him down a peg.
Yeah, I think end of the first round, you start thinking about it. There are too many other more stable options to me. Like even if someone like Jason Tatum isn't quite as good on a per game basis, like the gap isn't huge between.
Oh,
those
I'm taking
guys.
Tatum over Anthony Davis without even thinking twice about it. Give me the shooting percentages, the consistency, the rebounding.
Right.
You just know what you're getting with Tatum.
Yeah. So Jokic, SGA, Wembanyama, Luka, Tatum. That's 5 right there. Those are no doubt first rounders for me. Karl Anthony Towns, I think, has to be considered. He's been a first round value this year. He stayed healthy. He has a weird track record where like he had starting his career, he had like multiple 82 game seasons, and then he's had bad injury luck some years, but then he plays 75 the next year. Like I hesitate to put him in the same type of category as someone like Davis or even Luka. Obviously, if you got Towns this year, you feel great about it. I was a little bit lower on him just because I thought there'd be too many mouths to feed in New York, and he still had this fantastic year with Brunson getting his, Bridges, I think probably took the biggest step back. Anunoby's been great lately, but was a little slower early in the year. But for the most part, that entire starting 5 has gotten its numbers, and it hasn't really impacted Karl Anthony Towns. Now, he's not really doing much defensively. He's never been a high blocks guy, but he's at like 0.7 blocks per game, 1 steal. But the points, the rebounding, the assists, the shooting, the percentages have all been great. So he's in there for me. I think there's kind of a younger guard of guys like Cade Cunningham. I think is going to be a first round pick.
Cade's definitely a first round pick for me.
Yeah, Cade. Tyrese Halliburton, I think, is back in that. Trae Young has had another great fantasy season, even if it kind of counteracts what you see on the court sometimes. Anthony Edwards has done nothing really to push you away from him. The 3-point volume has been insane. But the veterans, I think, are going to be the toughest calls. We've talked a lot about James Harden. He's the number 6 player in per game value. Damian Lillard, very quietly, number 7. Another guy dealing with the blood clot issue. Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James. Those guys also first round values on a per game basis.
I'm a little surprised you have not mentioned the Greek Freak yet. Is the free throw shooting such a problem that has fallen out of the first round for you?
Totally depends. In points leagues, different ball game. In a roto league, it's on your taste. The one league where I have him that's roto, it was an auction, so kind of hard to say, but he was one of the bigger buys of the auction. And when you invest that kind of money into Giannis, then you have to kind of build your team around that. So I embraced the poor free throw shooting. I added some other shaky free throw shooters. I ended up winning rebounds. I was way up there in points. I think I was second in blocks. And Giannis gives you just about everything other than the free throw shooting. Field goal percentage, I think I was second there. So yeah, he's just kind of on his own island, honestly, where it's like if you look at where he ranks in terms of 8-cat value this season, it'll tell you that he's been like the 30th best player in fantasy. Obviously, that's not true if you build your roster the right way. So yeah, Giannis he's a first round pick. It just, you have to embrace it.
Back into the first round because of some of the difficulties that you have there. I see one that popped up here in the chat. Christian said Chet in the second round. I think by next year, I think I'd be comfortable toying with the idea of him kind of right around the point where I would be taking Anthony Davis. I would have those two pretty close to each other in my overall rankings.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Chet, I think you have to kind of consider him an injury risk. Another unique body type, kind of a freak injury, obviously that cost him his rookie season, and then kind of the same thing this year. I don't know. The numbers with Chet haven't been fantastic. He also hasn't had very many games where he's played more than like 32, 33 minutes. So I think there is still like a statistical ceiling that hasn't really been scratched yet. But so I pulled his top 15 games in terms of most minutes played. In those games, he's averaging 18.5 points, 10.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2.4 blocks, 1 steal, 50, 37, 75 shooting splits. I think that's reasonable. You look at where he ranks this year, it's quite a bit lower than that. But with someone like Chet, it's kind of similar to what you mentioned with Wembanyama to a lesser degree, right? You're not necessarily paying for the pass production, but you are forecasting the leap that you think he can make. So I think that's reasonable.
And I would pay attention to how he plays in the postseason because there's a chance that they're kind of keeping him on ice a little bit. I think we're going to get a bigger volume of Chet in the playoffs. And if he performs like a superstar, which I think he is very much capable of, I think that will enhance his draft status. A lot of basketball still to be played.
Yeah.
I think Chet is somebody that could use the postseason to up his overall ADP.
Yeah, no question about it. The other guys that I'll mention, we hit on most of them. Sabonis, I think is still in the mix. You kind of know what you're signing up for with him. Donovan Mitchell was borderline first round pick in some leagues, more of an early second rounder. I think he's been fine. And the Cavs have had so many blowouts that he's just not playing that many minutes. I think that's hurt his fantasy value a little bit. But
would Mobley be a consideration for you?
Not in the first round. No.
Strong second round pick.
Yeah. Second, probably a late second rounder for me. I don't know if there's quite the same level of upside with him. He's just kind of linearly made a small leap every year, and if the Cavs keep this team together too, it's like that's part of the reason that none of these guys rank in the first round is like it's kind of a sum of the parts thing. Nobody plays a ton of minutes, nobody's like handling everything every night. It's kind of a this 4-man team where everybody contributes like somewhat equally in their own way. Which is great in real life, not quite as good in fantasy. But yeah, like I said earlier, I think the veterans are going to be the really interesting ones. Are you buying in on Steph Curry and Harden and LeBron at their ages? Durant, we'll see where he ends up. Yeah, I think Tyrese Maxey is an interesting evaluation. I will say there is no world in which I'm touching Joel Embiid. Certainly not in the first round. Maybe not in any draft next year.
No, out on that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right, you want to wrap it up there, Brandon? I know you got to run.
Yeah, let's call it a season. Thank you guys so much for tuning in all the way through. As Nick mentioned at the top, we're going to continue to have episodes. They're just going to be a little less frequent than 4 times a week, but the Nick and Brandon pick and roll tandem is done with the regularity that we've had throughout the season. Appreciate everybody that has checked in, and especially lately, the way that we've been jumping around with our live stream schedule because of how busy Nick and I have been at this time of the year. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen. We appreciate you guys tuning in all season long.